So I want to start off with my thesis before we even begin, and that is this, that life is a relay race, that you can run as fast and as effectively as you want, but if we fail to pass the baton to the next generation, we lose. Really, in a certain sense, the success of the human race is all about passing the baton to the next generation behind us. And so the pro-life cause is fundamentally important because no matter how successful you are in your life, no matter what you achieve, if we don't pass on something meaningful to the next generation, we've failed. If we leave them poorer than we were, then we really haven't done our job. But if we can live in such a way that we enrich people, then we can do something amazing. And so I want to look at time, and I want to look at the way that we spend our energies and see if we can learn something. Because I do think there's an eternal perspective that we can have here that's so important. And then I want to take that eternal perspective and leverage it back into caring for the next generation, those in need, those who are weak, those who are yet to be born, and recognize that it really is the greatness of the human person to be able to defend those in need rather than to take advantage of them or abuse them, to use them for our ends or to make our life more convenient at their expense. And so, but I want to begin with time because I think there's something extraordinary about time. If you think about it, there's never been a moment in your life when you weren't living in time. And so time is all we know. And yet, the thing that's amazing about time is even though there's never been a moment in your life that you haven't been in time, we still find time to be something that's surprising. We find ourselves experiencing time and being surprised by it frequently in various ways. One of the ways we do that is we have a great time with one of our friends and we look at our watch and say, oh my goodness, where did the time go? Boy, does time ever fly. And at other times, you find yourself sitting through a boring lecture or something like that, and you look at the watch, and it seems like time is just crawling. You're thinking, is it ever going to end? Which I'm hoping is not the experience you're having right now. But we see this sense of time that both surprises us with how quickly it can move and how slowly it can drag at different times, and yet time doesn't change, and yet we're surprised by it. Which I think is interesting when you think about it, because again, why would that be the case? There are other things that are always around us. We've always had air around us. With the exception of the 9 months in the womb, we've always been surrounded by air, and yet we're never surprised by air. I go, oh wow, I took a breath, that's amazing. That's just not something that surprises us. There are very few other things that are always with us that surprise us more than time. And I think there's a reason for that, and I think the reason is that God He never wants us to take time for granted. He wants us to be constantly being brought back into awareness of time. Because if you think about it, time is the most precious commodity, the most precious possession, other than a relationship with the living God. The time He gives us is the greatest gift He gives us. It's more valuable than money. You can always get more money. You can't get more time. And we don't even know how much time we have. So it's a valuable, precious commodity that we can't get more of. And we have to recognize that God, I think, wants us to use it well. In fact, William Shakespeare said that you can't kill time without injuring eternity. And so to be able to recognize that time is this gift and that busy people, more than any, recognize this. And I worked with college students and then now recent college graduates who we send back on the college campus to be missionaries. And they're up from early in the morning till late at night, and they're doing all kinds of great things, and they're having a very difficult time trying to find the balance in their life. And I think one of the things that busy people recognize is that we have to have the right model of balance when it comes to time. I think that balancing in life is a little bit less like standing. Once you learn how to stand, you can kind of keep your balance and not think about it. And a little bit more like riding a unicycle. You can do it, but it just takes a lot of work and continuous effort because things are always changing. I think in my family, we can develop certain patterns of behavior in our family that are going very nicely, and then all of a sudden something changes. My favorite or least favorite is basketball season. To have multiple kids playing basketball at various times every day all week long throws off all of our meal times, all of our prayer times, all of our conversation times, and we have to learn to balance again and find a new stride at that season in life. And then basketball season ends and then it's something else. And so you kind of work through that, and there's many, many issues with regards to work and family and personal lives that help us to see that we really can't just balance in a static way. We have to constantly be looking at the gift of time and how to prioritize that. And there's a lot of different ways to do that, and we use different models when we train our staff on how to prioritize time, and we work with business CEOs and things like this to work on prioritizing time as well. But I really want to move beyond some of those tools, just a fundamental perspective about time. Because I think if we look a little deeper at time, we'll see a few fundamental principles that will help us to recognize how we should be using the very limited amount of time we have here on earth. Time is interesting because it's a little bit like an accordion. We've already explained one way how it is, that when things are going well, it seems to fly, and when things are not going so well, it seems to drag. But I would say there's another way that we can also look at a basic pattern in our life with regards to time. And that is this, that if you look forward into time, it seems to be like an accordion that's all stretched out. It seems like it's going to take a long time. I have a daughter who turned 16 just this week, and she has been looking forward to her 16th birthday for months. And she would say things like, "Oh, Dad, I don't know if it's ever going to get here." And it was, oh, it's so far out in the future. And there was this sense of longing for the future because time was an accordion that was all stretched out. But you ever notice that when you look into the past, it's an accordion that's all shrunk up? Remember high school? How about second grade? And see, we should learn something from this, because if we're paying attention, we'll recognize that all of the time in our life is actually moving from the accordion stretched out in the future through the present moment into the accordion squished down in the past. There will be a moment in our life when all of our moments will be in the past. And everything we did, everything we thought, everything we were afraid of suffering, all the joys we hope to experience, all these things will be squished together almost like on the page, one single page of a scrapbook. And it would be helpful to know that, because I think many times we avoid the difficult things in life because they seem to be too hard or too dangerous or too scary. And when you combine too dangerous and too hard and too scary with extended time, we become frightened, and then we pull back from the great goods that we've been called to. And what we have to recognize is that the obstacles, the challenges that we will have to endure when we get to our eternal inheritance will all seem relatively small compared to the great good we're gaining. That's important for us to know, because there's great things that we're being called to. I love one of the quotes of Pope Benedict XVI on the first day that he was Pope. You could imagine, you could say anything you want. You're the Pope, you got the whole world, you're the pastor of the Christian world, and you're going to say whatever you want in your first homily. And he said something that struck me so profoundly. He was speaking about many things, and he said, and to you young people, I wish to say one thing. The world offers you comfort, but you were not made for comfort. You were made for greatness. And I think this is a fundamental issue in our life today. There's never been a time in the history of the world when we have more access to comfort than we do right now. It's amazing. Even lower middle class people have access to running water. Kings and queens didn't have access to that just a few hundred years ago. To recognize that we have unbelievable access to luxury compared to most of the people who've ever lived on the face of the earth. And there's nothing wrong with luxury or comfort, except that it's tremendously distracting. And if you weren't made for comfort and you were made for greatness, then you can't remain comfortable. People who become great don't remain comfortable. There's a marathon going on right now. Could you imagine if I had decided that I was going to train for the marathon, and I thought, well, my training regimen will consist of this. I will sleep in every morning until 11. I will then eat a dozen donuts and take a nap. After that, I'm going to take a warm bath and relax. And then later in the evening, I'll watch a film about marathon running. I wouldn't make it around the first corner. I'm not sure I would make it that many donuts. I'm not sure I'd make it to the end of the week. We can't remain comfortable and be great. If you want to succeed in a challenge, and a marathon is a very real physical challenge, but I would argue even a marathon pales in comparison to the greatness that we've been called to. I love St. Ignatius of Loyola. He's the founder of the Jesuits, and he inspired an entire generation of hundreds of men in his lifetime to go out and become world changers, literally all over the world. And he would conclude every meeting with every one of these men. For over 20 years, he would meet with them and send them different places. At the end of every meeting, he would conclude with the same phrase. He would turn to them at the end of the meeting and say, "Go set the world on fire." And I do believe that that's what each of us have been called to do. To have a sense that God is not calling us primarily to be pious. Piety is a good thing, and it's a necessary aspect of life, but that's only part of it. He's not calling us to be pious. He's not calling us to spend lots more time in church. He wants us to come to church, but if you think about it, if just spending a lot of time in church was his primary concern. You know what he would love more than anything? He would love church pews because they're there all the time. I mean, church pews would be the most amazing thing. He'd be so proud of them. They never leave. But I don't think he's all that impressed with church pews. He doesn't, I always tell the college students we work with, he doesn't so much want you to go to church as he wants you to want to go to church. But even more than that, he wants you to live differently because really Christianity's never been about an ethical system, but it's about a relationship. It's not what we do, but it's who we are that leads us to pro-life convictions, that leads us to want to recognize that every gift from God is a sacred gift, and the more close they are to God, the more sacred they are. That's why life, the essence of God, He is eternal life. Life is so sacred, and why we have to be servants, even heroic servants, when we live in the midst of a culture of death and in the midst of people who do not always understand the significance of life, the lasting value of life. And so we look at time, and we have this issue, and I want to look at just a couple more reflections on time, and then I want to move on to the main point, which is what are we going to do as men and women who have been called into a living relationship with God? What are we then going to do to manifest that relationship in a world desperately poor in almost every imaginable way? How do we do that? Last couple reflections on time.